Welcome. This is Josh Wander from Israel Torah. Bring them home. A pleasure to be here with Rabbi Pinchas Winston. I haven't been around in a while, but it's so nice to see his shiny face again. And I was told by that too. I was told by Yehudis Shemroth, that's usually the hostess here, that unfortunately fortunately she's on her way back to Israel, so she's not able to kick this off. But I'm supposed to promote Rabbi Winston's new book, which it looks like he has his website right below his name, so that is all set. And I'm going to let him take over. And we're looking forward to another great year. Thank you.
Thanks. Good Shabbos. Thank you. Okay, continuing on with strategy for the end of days. That's the book that's now published. It's now available in Amazon, paperback, Kindle, PDF through my website, and it's got all this information, but in much more detail, and a lot of very interesting and very important points to note. But this time of history. Someone wrote to me today, not the first time, it happens every once in a while. He was disappointed. Pesach came and it went. No Mashiach. And he thought, do we have to wait another year? Because the Gemara says that in Nisan, the Jewish people will be revealed, meaning Pesach time, the 15th of Nisan, I guess until the 7th of Nisan, the 7th day of Pesach. And it didn't happen, as far as he could see, as far as he knows. And the world still going down the same path. And he was disappointed and a little distraught about the fact that we may have to wait another year. So I reminded him that the Leshem, whom I often quote, Rav Shlomo Eliashiv, he's the only person I ever saw this in, but it does make perfect sense, really makes perfect sense, that the Gula only begins on Pesach time and it ends on Shavuos. So you can get start in motion, because anyhow, as we know, that there's a unique relationship, unlike, let's say, from Shavuos to Sukkot or Sukkot to Pesach, there's a very strong connection between Pesach and Shavuos. And you have the Omer connecting the two of them. And it's basically like that the whole holiday, all 7 days of Pesach are like Yantif, and then really the first day. And Shavuos is the last day. There's only one day in Eretz Yisrael, Shavuos. So you have one day at the beginning, one day at the end, and then you have 49 days in between, connecting them with the spheres of Omer, and that's like Chol Hamoed. That's like Chol Hamoed. So it's like one big holiday from Pesach to Shavuos, and so it's very feasible to say that the Gula began in Pesach time and ends on Shavuos with the giving of Torah, because that is the real Gula. That's what the Mishnah says in Pirkei Avos, that there's no cheres except for someone who's osik b'Torah. So if that's the case, it means the Jewish people, by definition, could not be involved in learning Torah, not like we do today, until they received the Torah. So even though they were physically freed when they left Mitzrayim, they were not spiritually free yet. That would take Kabbalas HaTorah at Har Sinai 50 days after Leil Seder in Mitzrayim. So that's understandable, completely understandable. But even still, the question, it's one of the most sought after answers, at least in the Torah world. I mean, maybe not so much today, because people, they're used to not asking the question, and the truth, as long as the Galus is going well, and it was for a long time for the Jewish people, we more or less had our way about it, then people don't anticipate the Gula, the redemption, that much. They don't ask about Mashiach so much. And I know, because I used to start talking about it back in the 1990s, and people weren't interested. I was told specifically when I came to speak at places, don't talk about that. People want to hear about that, other things, but not that. Then, of course, after the Twin Towers, and the world was changed, and then that became the topic itself. In fact, it was all over the newspapers and all the Armageddon, the end of days, Torah, all these things. And you see the hand of HaKadosh Baruch Hu moving that direction, but how much longer? It's like it goes on and on. You done for it, and for those who really take it seriously, understand the importance of it, even if their lives are going well and they're having a good time, still they know that until the Shekhinah is back in the Beis Hamikdash in Eretz Yisrael, and none of this insanity is anywhere in the world whatsoever, it's exile in the fullest sense of the term. And the Shekhinah is still in Galus, and therefore, technically speaking, if we were really sensitive to what the world was, what's going on in the world, it's not just what's going on in terms of the news and the politics, and nationally, internationally. That's really secondary. The main thing is just the fact that the divine presence is not able to be in the base of Mikdash and connecting up with the Jewish people the way it's meant to be, as it will be, God willing, soon in Yemos HaMashiach. That would be enough to tear our clothing and to mourn and to sit on the floor and cry the entire time. When the base of Mikdash was first destroyed, the Gemara says that they made the gezeras. They made the gezeras about reducing music. They made the gezeras about a lot of things we do, putting mostly, for example, that square unfinished area, 1 amma by 1 amma by the front door, that you don't paint, you don't finish off, to remind us that the base of Mikdash has not yet been built. There's certain gezeras, certain decrees they made so that we wouldn't forget that we're in exile, even if we're still living in Eretz Israel. And the people, they went even further than what the rabbis were telling them to do. For example, they didn't want to have any more meat anymore because meat was used for sacrifices. Now there's no sacrifices, we don't want meat. They want to drink water. Well, they didn't actually mention the wine. And the rabbi said to them, if that's the case, then you shouldn't have bread either, because there was also lechem, a pudding that was brought, and you shouldn't have water because of the sachim, right? So they got the message that you could only mourn so much, but not too much. But the people themselves, they were over the top. They wanted to do a lot more because it really hurt them to have lost the base of Mikdash. At least those people didn't want to lose it, probably didn't deserve to lose it, but they really felt connected to it, where, as time goes on, you learn to live without the base of Mikdash. You learn to live without things that are important to you, because, as they say, time heals all things, not necessarily completely and not necessarily always, but a lot of the time. The Gemara says that we forget things after 12 months, me after 12 minutes. But it's just a part of human nature. It's just part of the way we function, we work. So if a person has patience, just wait. You know that at some point in the future, you'll be able to adjust. And we do. And that's both a good thing and a negative thing, because some things we should not adjust to and not adapt to. But this is what the whole connection to the world is supposed to be like for a Jew. But things go well for us, Baruch Hashem, and not just that, but in some respects it's even more difficult because we build great yeshivas and we have fantastic learning. Okay, so even if it's not on the same level it was in Europe and earlier than that, but nonetheless it's still absolutely remarkable the type of learning that goes on today. And the Chadarim and Yeshiva Katanas, Yeshiva Gedolas, Baruch Hashem, Bati Midrashos, Bati Mikdash, Bati Kinesios, right? It's like amazing, how far we've come in terms of that. So it's very easy to get used to it and then forget the overall pitch of Jewish history, and that is you have to work to bring back the base of Mikdash, and the Shekhinah, until you do, the Shekhinah is in pain, suffering. We spoke about that in previous weeks. But the main thing is that Mashiach is something that we're supposed to want every single day. One of the 6 questions they ask you on Yom Adin, say, peace of Yeshua. Did you anticipate redemption? That's the language. Say, peace, that you look forward to it. And that doesn't say during difficult times only. It's all the time. Did you anticipate redemption? And when you anticipate something, you look forward to something, then you proactively do things to try to expedite it and to work on it, to be involved with it, not to forget it. So that's going to be a question. And whether you take it seriously or not, you're going to have to answer for that. And you can fool yourself and you can fool your neighbors, but you can't fool HaKadosh Baruch Hu any of the time. And therefore, think about it. You got to take it to heart. That's what this book, Strategy for the End of Days, is all about. It's about what we could be doing right now to save ourselves from the situation, not just in terms of physical harm, but also not getting distracted away from things that count the most, because the clock is ticking down. And even though it's the most difficult thing in the world to believe that there's going to be a redemption and that can happen in our time, that's probably going to be the case. I only say probably because I'm nervous to commit myself, because I'm part of this world too. But in my heart of hearts, I believe it will be the case. I believe our generation, at least those who survive the transition through that, but we're going to see it happen in our lifetime, just because of the fact of not just what's going on, but the timelines all according to Gemaras, but also according to Kabbalah and what has to happen. And that's an important point. what has to happen, right? And how it affects the overall cheshbon. Because the truth is, and the Arizal talks about this too, the Arizal says in Shar HaGilgulim, chapter 20, they're all called introductions, but it's chapter 20. And he mentions that the final redemption is going to be the completion of the first redemption. It's going to be a replay of the first redemption. Not that we're going to see a bunch of Egyptians with all those headdresses running around. It won't even probably involve the country of Egypt that much anymore. But there's going to be a strong similarity and connection between what's going to happen in the final redemption and what happened in the first redemption. And therefore, as a result of that, the Vilna Gaon and the Ramchal before him just made tremendous comparisons between one and the other, and took lessons out of the early redemptions, specifically the one from Mitzrayim, because also Babel and Medai, Yavan, and Edom, but they applied it to our time, to the final redemption. That's what they did. So that's the way it's supposed to play itself out. But the Rizal explains that there's a historical process. It's the same thing. Someone wants to be a doctor. He says, I want to be a doctor. So what do I have to do? Well, you have to, first of all, apply to, get your BA, right? And when you get your BA, then after that, you can apply to medical school. And then you have to go through all the medical school, then you have to intern. And after you finish doing all of the requirements, then you can become a doctor, officially a doctor. Those are the requirements. You cannot be a doctor without those things, at least a medical doctor, right? Because they've sat down, they figured out this is what it takes to become a reliable, hopefully non-dangerous doctor. I mean, anyone can call themselves a doctor. People have done things. They've been scams where people have called themselves doctors and showed up and started acting like a doctor with no real background, no real official education. So, how long will it take? Well, the schooling is like this, and the internship is like this, and finding a job. But that's more or less the time it takes. If you're not going to fulfill the requirements, then you're not going to become a doctor or an architect for that matter, right? Or an engineer or whatever chachma or skill you're trying to take on. So the same thing is true with Mashiach. What's holding Mashiach up? We're not worthy. Okay, what if to become worthy? And anyhow, the Gemara says that that's not necessarily an ikuf, because the Gemara says the Mashiach can come either generations kulu chayev, kulu zaka, kulu chayev. Either generations completely, or at least the majority is worthy, right? But or the majority is chayev. That's a shu'in. That definitely, where we're holding right now. Yeah. Okay. So what does it mean to be chayiv? Chayiv means to be, what's the word? Culpable. That you're on the hook. There sins. God. You owe God. And the generation is majority chayiv, meaning that the majority of the generation is sinning. And sinning can involve different levels. There's sinning accidentally. There's sinning on purpose. There's sinning to rebel against God. There's different levels. So what does God call it to be kulu chayiv? We don't know exactly, but it would seem like that's the situation today. Yet Mashiach's not here yet. Why not? What's holding him up specifically? So the Rizal says very, very, very clearly, okay, there's a mission. History has a mission. And at one point in time, it was all of mankind, Adam Rishon, and then Adam did the Chet Eitz Hadas Tabarah. He ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and he undid that. And after that, it was like, it was up for grabs. Who would take responsibility? So Abraham was really the first. Noah was a tzaddik, amazingly, to a large degree. He met Adam, so he at least had an idea of what the world was about, but he wasn't the full thing. And as a result of that, he wasn't Abraham. According to the priest tzaddik, he could have been Moshe Rabbeinu this time. The flood was supposed to have been Torah from heaven and the oral law. And he would have taught the entire generation, but it just didn't happen. Moshe was the first one to do that. But Avraham was the first one to start the nation. And once Avraham chose God, then God chose Avraham, and he became the responsible. Him, then his descendants after him, became responsible to do once upon a time was for all of mankind. And that was specifically Jewish people. And this is what it means to be led into nations, and our obligation as to live by Torah. The Torah is like a toolkit. The Torah was given to us by Hashem as tools to do the job of rectifying creation. But what does it mean to rectify creation? So we've talked about this a lot in the past also, for those who've been here before. And I have books about this because it's a lot of details. I'm not going to describe the whole thing right now because it's too complicated. But there's this thing called the Tzotzi Kedusha, sparks, holy sparks. They run the world. You know how atoms are in everything? Nothing can physically exist without atoms. So it's just a question of the combination and electrons and this thing, and close connections, distant connections, whatever. It's all atoms. That's in the physical world. In the spiritual world, it's all in the tzotzi. It's all sparks and what's called broken pieces from something else. But sparks are where it's at. That's the main thing. Now, what happens is that we know that everybody will agree that there's good and there's evil. Okay, you want to get philosophical and discuss whether evil really is evil, whether it's the real thing or just a perception. I think even Einstein was able to prove to his college professor that evil really is not essentially what it seems to be. It's just some reality for the time being that we call evil. But ultimately speaking, evil, whatever you want to call it, what we call bad things happen to people in the world. Good people, bad people, doesn't make it, but bad things happen. And if it happens to a bad person, it's a good thing. If it happens to good people, it's a bad thing. People are doing evil stuff in the world right now. We're suffering through the evil of other people. Yes, it's true that the people doing the evil often don't think they're doing evil. You're right? Hitler, was a pretty intelligent person, unfortunately, I found out, right? And he had an ideology. It wasn't just out of nowhere. He was killing off Jews also as part of an ideology. He thought he was doing the world a favor. Believe it or not, he thought he was doing the world a favor by getting rid of the Jews. It's completely perverted, distorted. So where's the evil in that? Well, the evil would be, check it out. You can assume anything's good if you want to, but you have to know whether you're right. Is there a way to know if you're right or wrong? If someone's telling you, no, that's completely the opposite of what God wants. I don't believe in God, but you don't believe in God. Let me show you why God exists. But you say no. You just block it. That's evil. Because you have a chance to know truth, and you, for whatever reason, have said no. You want to say, I don't want to. I know I should, and I feel bad that I'm not going to, but I'm afraid, right? So that's less evil, but still not good, obviously. I mean, you can't do the right thing. But if a person says, no, I don't want to know your proofs of God, that's evil. Because you could know truth, and you choose not to know truth. I don't want to know how you know Torah came from Mount Sinai. I'm not interested. I have a good life. I'm happy the way I don't want to change. That's called evil. Okay, there's evil and there's evil. There's evil where someone is murdering somebody, God forbid, an innocent person, and there's evil where a person denies truth. It's also called evil. Evil has many different levels to it. Even if you have a choice between good and better, and you only chose the good, the difference between what you could have had and did in the end is also called evil. Again, it's relative to the levels, but that's the concept of evil. Evil really is the lack of good. So anywhere there's a lack of good, there's going to be evil by definition. So we agree. There's a reality of evil in the world, and there's a reality of good. Clearly, there's good all over the place. It may be limited sometimes, and not enough are in the world, but there's a lot of good. Even people who are doing that type of evil we spoke about are also doing good things too. They're giving charity, helping out, their conscience. They just won't go the full distance. But there's good and there's evil. The trouble is, here's the whole problem. They mix together. That's why the world is the way it is today. Even all of us, even a person living by Torah, is said to be on the level of Eitz Hadas Tov Ra. Not the level of the tree. You're not a tree. Oh, man's compared to a tree, but you're not a tree. But the tree of knowledge of good and evil is just one manifestation of this reality called the combination of good and evil. And history is about one thing and one thing only: the separation of the good from the evil. And once that's completed, the evil will simply disappear. It's not like a big body will be lying in the ground dead, and now we have to bury it. Fine, it's good, it's over, it's dead. Right? Like Goliath. When he was dead, he dropped to the ground. He had to deal with the body. But when evil finally is conquered, and you conquer it by disconnecting completely from any good whatsoever, so it cannot draw any life force from the good, it will simply dry up and disappear and go up like smoke, as if it never existed. That's all of history. And the moment the last good is separated out from that evil, Mashiach comes like that. The door opens up. Mashiach is in every generation. People, the question is not when will Mashiach come. He's here. Believe it. He's here because he's here in every generation. The Gon says this, and in every generation there's somebody who could be Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David. It never skips a generation. It's always there. So then why don't we see them? Sometimes they're like minor versions. In fact, the Vilna Gaon held that Esther, Mordechai, they were in the level of Mashiach ben Yosef in their time. Anytime someone acts like a hero to save the Jewish people in any way, in any capacity, they have an aspect of Mashiach ben Yosef because they're functioning in the level of nature. But there's also Mashiach ben David. So why doesn't he reveal himself? That's the question. Not when will he come, but when will he reveal himself? Will he reveal himself? Or will he simply live and die without having revealed himself? And the next soul that comes in, it's already in the world anyhow at the same time, will finally be the one that will be able to reveal it as Mashiach ben David. That's the question. So Mashiach is always here. The soul of Mashiach is always in the world. There's never a time it's not. The only question is, when will it finally be able to reveal itself in the body of somebody and then do the job of Mashiach ben David? So the Arizal explained. He said that when that last part of the good in creation is separate from the bad. Now, take a look, right? Our bodies do this all the time. We eat food, right? And we eat an apple, and it's a combination of good and bad. We don't think about it that way, but it is. Off the bat, we might core the apple, take out the pits. We don't want the pits. We don't eat the pits, right? Because everyone knows if you swallow a pit, a tree will grow in your stomach. And nobody wants a tree to grow in their stomach. So get rid of the pits right away, right? The apple itself is the food, right? That's the food, and you're going to eat that, and that's going to become the energy for your body to survive, to last. So your body will take care of all that. Your body will somehow, miraculously, is able to distinguish between the good stuff and the bad stuff, separates them, takes the good stuff, breaks it down with enzymes and whatever, chemicals, and then puts it into your bloodstream to go exactly where it has to go based upon the nutrients it is carrying to keep your body alive and healthy. And the bad stuff, the body just gets rid of as waste. Amazing. But that's what an idea. You think you would have an idea, right? And every time you have to decide, make a decision, it's because until you make the decision, you're wavering this way. So everything's combined together. A decision means you made the separation. That's what the decision feels like. It's called psak halacha because it means like you cut it off. Whatever was there, you get rid of one aspect and you're left with a single idea, a decision, and that hopefully is the good. If it's the bad, you're in big trouble because you took the bad and dispensed with the good. But that's hopefully the average person who's normal and healthy, they want to make a good decision, a meaningful decision. So that's what the brain's doing. We're doing it all through life. When finally all of the separation taking place, the Mashiach can come and reveal himself. That's what happens. Not before, not a second before. So the real thing you want to know is, in history and creation, is how much combination is still left. How much more good is there to separate out, and how do you do it? If you could figure that out, you could figure the exact moment of Mashiach's revelation in history, because it's going to happen, bang, just like that. And the reason why it's been going on for thousands of years is not because God has all the patience in the world and we don't, but because the job has not been done. And it goes back and forth, by the way, sometimes. You see in history, there's times there's more good than bad, and there's times there's more bad than good. Depends on what the situation might be, a war, and, or various different ways to express as countries that have an ideology that goes completely against what God wants for mankind, but they think it's good. Okay, you have to check it out. Let's figure it out. All right, what are you basing yourself on? And that's what it means. That's what history is about. Now, the Leshem, he explains this in more detail, and it's more complicated. And I'll try do the best I can to try to explain this. And this is part of the strategy. This is the strategy for the end of days means, what should I be doing? What should I be working? What should I be thinking about to separate myself out from the rest of the world, if necessary, that I can rise above that reality in which the war of Gog and Magog and Chevli Mashiach, the birthplace of Mashiach, are affecting people. You know, even something as simple as looking at the news. And someone, what's going on right now? People, the arms shipment that was supposed to come here to Israel. And I mean, in the past, no one ever would have questioned it. It would have come anyhow. And all of a sudden now, things are changing, not like they used to be. No surprises here. Just not wanted. It's undesirable, but you had to think it was going to happen at some point in time. You could see where things were going in the world. If a person was just smart and paying attention, you knew this is where it was going. And if you know Kabbalah, you know it has to go that way. And we'll see why, hopefully shortly. But people, Biden, this, or Obama, or this or that. Forget the names. The names, they don't matter to us. They do not matter to us. Baruch Hu has many different types of ways to act out his will. It's not that the Americans have changed their policy. It looks like that. It sounds like that, but it's not what it's about. The question is why is the U.S. government deciding, and they explain themselves, by the way, why they're doing it. They think it's offensive. To use that, they use these weapons to go into Rafah and to bomb civilians, so therefore they'll always do whatever they need for Israel's defense, they said, but not for their offense. And they couldn't consider it's like one person's idea of defense versus offense. What are you talking about? The whole war is defensive from start to finish. And the only reason why their civilians are at risk is because of the Hamas leadership, not because of Israel. What was Israel doing on October 7th when this whole thing began? Celebrating the holy Simchas Torah. They were not going to war, not planning for war. They weren't even prepared for what happened that day. This whole thing began because we know why. Because Israel won't give them a state. What are you talking about? First they said it's because they had no land. So we went ahead and gave them the land. The Israeli government under Sharon went ahead and kicked out upstanding Israeli citizens who worked their entire lives to build up Gush Katif, kicked them out, dumped them, abandoned them, ruined their lives and industry at the same time to give a homeland to the Palestinians. And they got it. And it's not enough just to have a land, you have to have money. So they got billions and billions and billions of shekels pouring into the country. They had more than enough to turn Gaza Strip into a tourist resort, not a terrorist resort. That's what they could have done. If they just take everything that was given to them on a silver platter, plus, and built it into a place that people can come from all over the world, it could have been another Dubai, another Singapore. That's what they called it at that time. A potential Singapore in the Middle East, in the Mediterranean Sea. The location, the beaches they had, unbelievable. And imagine, they built hotels, and the industry starts to pick up, and people are going to start coming because they're showing favoritism, and they want to help, besides the money. And it would have been a successful little country making a ton of money, and people, the quality of life could have gone up for the average Palestinian. And what would Israel have done then? Israel would have said, well, it looks like they changed their mind. It looks like they've changed their ways. It looks like they're more focused now on living normal lives, and they're happy with what they have, and they have more than enough. So maybe it's time to, increase diplomatic ties and make some business deals and support them. They're right. Maybe even give an airstrip. And right now people are landing in Tel Aviv in order to go down to Gaza to avoid all that, and they're not using it anymore for military. So they're not building tunnels to attack Israelis. They would have had their homeland and probably ended up with their two-state solution there. Probably. They didn't do that. They could have, didn't. They chose not to. And they attack and kill us, and not just kill us. They did atrocities that made the Holocaust look a lot better than it used to be, than it used to look. Incredible. Smaller numbers, yes, but the level of barbarism, anybody who supports these people is complicit with what they did, and they do, and are still doing. Complicit. They don't think about that. They think they're heroic. No. They're supporting murderers. That's what they're doing, whether they realize it or not. And a heavy cheshbon to pay at the end of the days when they have to talk to God about the whole thing. And that's the way, that's offensive. That's not offensive. There's no excuse. This is all from them, completely from them. We're a country, and I don't mean to talk about this too much right now, but it's important. We're a country that cannot afford to spend one single dollar on military operations. Everything has to go into infrastructure, and we don't have a lot of resources. To take that money and use it to fight a war that we don't want. We're not expansionists. We don't want to have more land. We're not looking to do that. We're making more with the land we have. Amazingly, by the way. And yet convoluted. But that's because it's all part of this. The lesson explains the following thing. Everybody has a body and a soul. What we take for granted is that they work together. But the reality is, and this is a huge question for anyone who thinks about it, but certainly for the Kabbalists, how is it possible for the body and soul that are completely different from one another, opposites, literally in a sense hate each other? How could they possibly work together? I mean, I'm sitting here nice and comfortable. I don't feel an inner battle going on. If I have a moral choice to make, then maybe I feel that inner battle. And then you're using free will. But just sitting here right now, I don't feel my soul jumping out of my skin to go back to where it's supposed to go, or my body trying to take me back to the ground and dump the soul. It's like, more or less comfortable. How does that work? How's that possible? You have to know there's a certain amount of background information to fully understand the idea, but in short, very, very simplistic form, that there's an interface. And the first thing you have to understand and realize, even though the body is not like the soul in any way, it is. Because everything by definition in creation has to be made from the same divine light we call Or Ein Sof. If something is not made from the infinite light of God, it cannot exist. So then why are some things on such a low level and something so holy on such a high level? And the answer is because of all the layers over the light. So, for example, if you take a candle and you put like a plastic bag in front of it, there's a layer there, but you can see the candle, you can see the light. You add another layer, it becomes a little bit more blurry. Another layer, even more blurry. If you had enough, believe it or not, if you had enough layers of plastic bags, let's say 500 layers of plastic bags, one top of the other, eventually you won't get the light at all, even though it's clear. But it's not perfectly clear. So as it gets thicker, 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 eventually the light's inside there. It's inside the entire time. It hasn't changed. But the layers to which to see the light, they have been increased. So likewise, holiness, this was Parsha, is about holiness. Holiness is really just not a function of how much light's coming down, but how many layers are over the light. So the body, by definition, has to be from the same light that the soul comes from. So why is the body so physical? Because it has a lot more layers, spiritually speaking. I mean, it has 7 layers of skin, but we're not talking about that. It's just spiritually has more layers than the soul. So the soul is a pure version of the light, and the body is the same light with more layers. And because of that, there's a connection automatically in the body to connect to the soul. Now, because of all the layers, it's not like a loving, automatic, magnetic connection, but there's something there to, it's like meeting it's an amazing thing about it. You meet a long-lost relative. I mean, I know someone who's very much into genealogy, and he spent years tracking down relatives that the rest of us would never find because there's no way to know they're our relatives. But he did the work, and eventually he unearthed cousins that there was no way to know other than the work he did to do this, and he met with them. And because they could look at this family tree and see that way back when they were connected, even though today they're not connected at all, but through that tree they are, immediately there was a bond that didn't happen, but people they were friendly with for years already, the same level, because it's your family. On some level, your family, that bond. So in some level, the soul and the body are like family, right? Distant relatives, 10 times removed at least. And because of that, there's already a possibility. But there's this one layer, call it like a membrane, if you will. But it's kind of like just like, for example, the brain is the brain and the skull is the skull. You don't think about the membrane between the two of them, but there's a membrane between the two to protect the brain. And it's there, and it functions a certain way, and it's important. It's very thin. So likewise, there's kind of a membrane between the soul and the body. And you're born with it, and you live your entire life with it, and you go to the world to come with it. In fact, it is what determines how long you will live and how much reward you will get in the world to come. Why? How does it work? Because apparently you start off with this clothing membrane for your soul, so to speak, but you can add to it. It's like having a sweater. You start out with a sweater, you start to knit the sweater, and there's an arm, and there's start to the chest a little bit, but eventually you just keep adding to it, and maybe add some decoration to it. You add to it. So likewise, you can add to this clothing of the body, of the soul inside the body. What are you adding, and how do you do it? So the clothing is increased and added to by the amount of the sparks, which we'll call the good, that you bring out of the evil in creation by learning Torah, performing mitzvahs, doing good, by doing good. Every time you do a good thing, you pull good out of the bad, but it doesn't just go into the world. It becomes part of your personal clothing, and therefore, in a sense, it gives your clothing, that membrane, whatever you want to call it, additional body, so to speak, no pun intended, additional body. And that additional body becomes increased energy that can go to the body and therefore increase your life. Up to a limit, but a lot. And since you have taken this good out of the evil, it also becomes your reward in the world to come. It's like getting medals. A person goes to war, and they start off as a private, and they work their way up a bit, but they do some heroic act, and they get a certain medal, right? A medal of honor and another medal, and they got all these medals, and their clothing, in a sense, now is representative of their accomplishments or degrees, but this is rather the clothing itself. So when a person is doing all this Torah and learning all these mitzvahs, they're not just getting reward. Their act, that is the reward. Their reward in the world to come, to be able to connect to God and get the ultimate pleasure forever, is going to be based upon how many sparks they have woven into their clothing that connects up the body and the soul. I understand this is complicated. I'm actually translating, the Leshem on this piece right now specifically, and so the details are there. You can read the future Bezrat, but the main point is not that. The main point over here, why I bring it up in the first place, is because that's what the Rizal is talking about. When he says the Mashiach can only come once all the good is separate from the bad, then by definition, it's the same idea. Because the separation of the good from the bad is not only that separation, but it's at the same time, it's building a person's, it's actually, the actual Hebrew name is Tselem, like Tselem Elokim, the image of God, right? It's called a Tselem. For different reasons, but that's what it's called. You're increasing that spiritual membrane that connects up your body and your soul, which also results in better health, as well, because the health is just a matter of the energy that goes from the soul to the body. So if you can increase that connection, then more energy will go to the body's going to be healthier. That's how it works on a spiritual level. And the Leshem says that Mashiach will only come once all the tselem, means all the clothing of the souls of all the people living in the world, or at least specifically the Jewish people, have been rectified. When those have been rectified, then Mashiach will come. So it's the exact same idea that the Rizal is talking about. But what is it telling us? It's telling us that, yeah, we want Mashiach now. And if we stamp our feet enough, we bang the table, maybe he'll come. Maybe. I can't say no, right? Because who knows the power of that. But I will tell you this, that that's not what the Rizal says. It's not what the Leshem says. It's not what any of the Mekublim say. People understand how this world was made and how this world works and functions and how Mashiach is going to come. They don't bring that up. They talk about the rectification of the separation of the good from the evil, which brings us to the world today. Because you see, that's what's happening. It's been happening for some time. It's a process called birur, which means separation. But you see, look what's going on in the world. I mean, step back, step real far back. Don't just look at, don't be in the moment and just see what's happening around you in the newspapers and what people. Stand back and look at the larger picture. And you see what's been going on at least since around 2000. Earlier than that, but it was much more subtle. It's always going on, by the way. There's no way to avoid it. That's what history is about, the separation of the good from the bad. But it's more subtle sometimes. But now, not lately, in the last couple of decades, especially in the last couple of years, you see people being pushed either to the far right or the far left. And they even talk about the middle class evaporating. That's financially, that's economically, but it's also symptomatic of the way the world's going. Whatever's happening spiritually will show up in different forms in history, in the world, and different things. So that's just one other example of the idea, like middles are disappearing. The sitting on the fence no longer works because it's kind of hard to do that. Everybody has an opinion, and everyone's being forced to express an opinion in one way or another. And they don't realize what's really going on is that they're either identifying themselves as the good, because before they were mixed together with the bad. I mean, how many stories I've heard personally of people who worked in offices for years with people, friendly with them, even spouses. I mean, the Trump thing was really, if it wasn't so ridiculous, it would have been funny. But I mean, families broke up over who you voted for. It was, yes or no. But they don't realize. They think it's just an emotional response to the situation. If it's causing a separation, if anything is causing things to separate, it is a more intense part of this process, the messianic process. And now you have to ask yourself the question, where am I in all this? Am I being pushed more towards the right way? Oh, well, what is the right way? Well, that's why God gave the Torah, to allow us to answer that question. Am I going more, even just inching, but in that direction, when I'm on the right side of the line? But if I find myself becoming more the opposites, further away from what God intends for creation, how do I know that? Because I compare my lifestyle, my thinking to the Torah lifestyle. But you don't believe in Torah. Well, that's stage one. That's not going to be an excuse. God's going to say, listen, I gave you the Torah, then I was right and wrong. Yeah, but I didn't believe in Torah. Well, then why didn't you go check it out? Because I didn't want to. Well, that's your fault. I just saw, in the prophet Hosea and the Meforshim that someone killed Achav, the king of Israel, after the kingdom split, and Achav was the king of Israel. He was a bad king. He was a bad Jew, so to speak. He didn't keep Torah mitzvahs at all, and he worshipped the Baal, one of the worst avodas, idol worships at that time. And someone killed him for doing it. But then they went ahead and they did the same idol worship themselves. Later, after killing, they eventually took on the same habits. So Hashem says, he says, because of that, I now look at, if you had killed them to stop the idol worship in my honor, and then you went and became righteous yourself, then I call it a huge mitzvah. It's a kiddush Hashem, and I praise you for having stood up on my behalf like Pinchas does in Parshas Balak. But if you're going to go ahead and kill these people, even though it's for the right reason, and then go do the very thing that they were killed for, then I now look at it as if you have spilled innocent blood. And I'm wholly responsible for Achav's blood. You know, he's a bad guy. But because of what you did. So you see, like, how you act things out, what you think and how you behave, right? Even though, it's not what your intention was. It wasn't what you were thinking. Just no one pressured you. If only my neighbor who became a Baal Tshuva had pushed me. Well, he spoke to me. You didn't want to talk to him. Yeah, but he should have pushed me. He should have argued with me. He should have hit me over the head and kidnapped me and brainwashed me. No, it's not the way it works. You have free will. You have a choice. Because you choose not to go looking for the truth, I hold it as if you went ahead and denied the entire Torah. Even though you say you didn't, but you just didn't believe in it, but you could have believed in it, like a lot of other people who did, who went from 0 to 60 in 2 years. They didn't believe, and all of a sudden they believed. So that's your responsibility, your thing. So the Leshem says that when all these, selim are completed, and how does it work? Well, the good has to be separate from the bad. And as people get pushed more towards the left or more towards the right, we're watching the final stage of the separation. What's going to happen? What's going to happen in the end? You'll be surprised. All these scary people and things that look so strong and so powerful, and like they would be around forever, and there's no way to undo them, they're just going to dry up and disappear like smoke. Until they do, they might do some damage along the way. And they will do damage, but it's nothing that God himself hasn't sanctioned as part of this process. So if a person takes upon themselves now not to wait and looks at their life and says, where's the good? Where's the bad? What can I improve? How can I make myself more metukan and my selim more perfect? That's a person who's following the proper strategy at the end of the days and can change the reality and be more protected from what's coming up. Shabbat Shalom.